Welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. The boys are back at it again with some new gameplay with some of their favorite decks. First is Ethan, bringing back Sythis, Harvest's Hand. Green-white enchantment tribal, play enchantments, draw cards, repeat. The deck speaks for itself a little bit. He starts the game with the Plains, Canopy Vista, Croson Verge, Fertile Ground, Unflinching Courage, Oromancer, and Resurgent Belief. Next is Cameron, piloting Obeka, Brute Chronologist. With this deck, Cameron plans to end his turn early with his commander's ability in order to get around many potential downsides on his cards. His opening hand has a Sulphurous Mire, Watery Grave, Dimir Aqueduct, Misty Rainforest, Clever Impersonator, Glorious End, and a Rakdos Signet. Third is Shelby, piloting Marchesa, the Black Rose. This deck is all about Dethrone, keeping its own life total low and attacking the player with the highest life. His opening hand has a Crumbling Necropolis, Vivid Crag, Command Tower, an Island, a Swamp, Treasonous Ogre, and Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Last up is Chandler, piloting Illuna, Apex of Wishes. His signature Make-A-Wish Foundation deck comes back, hoping to flip into some insane cards off his commander's ability. He starts the game with the Temple of Mystery, a Forest, Exotic Orchard, Dockside Extortionist, Pouncing Shore Shark, Farseek, and Return of the Wild Speaker. You've seen the decks in their hands. Now go ahead and leave us a comment on who you hope will win this game. I hope you sit back, relax, and enjoy this gameplay.
It looks like Ethan wins the die roll. He plays a tapped Canopy Vista and passes. Cameron plays his Sulphurous Mire tapped and passes to Shelby, who plays a Crumbling Necropolis tapped and passes to Chandler. And it looks like it's tapped lands all around. Chandler plays his Temple of Mystery and scries one to the top. He then passes to Ethan, who quickly plays his Plains, casts Sythis, and passes to Cameron. Cameron shocks in his Watery Grave, taps for 2, and casts his Rakdos Signet, and then passes to Shelby. Shelby plays an Island, and then casts a Mind Stone before passing to Chandler. Chandler plays his Exotic Orchard, taps for 2, and casts Farseek. He already knows he's going to get his Triumph, so he passes to Ethan while he's searching. And on his turn, Ethan casts a Fertile Ground on his Plains. He will also draw a card and gain a life. After this, he will play Croson Verge tapped as his land for turn. He will then move to combat and swing Sythis at Shelby, trying to get him off the throne early to establish good relations through violence. Ethan will then pass to Cameron, who plays a Dragon Skull Summit, and immediately casts Obeka. He then passes to Shelby. On his turn, Shelby shocks in his own Watery Grave and casts his commander, Marchesa. Shelby will then pass to Chandler. Chandler will play a Forest as his land for turn, and then briefly scans the table, counting 4 artifacts and enchantments, and realizes he can cast Dockside Extortionist, get 4 treasures, and then mutate Illuna on top of it. Chandler will spin the wheel and get a turn 3 Coma. He'll then pass to Ethan and get a 3/3 on his upkeep. Ethan then plays a Hall of Heliod's Generosity and then casts a Smothering Tithe, drawing a card and gaining a life. He'll then cast a land tax to draw and gain again. He then just passes to Cameron with nothing else to do. Cameron doesn't pay for the Smothering Tithe, and Chandler gets a 3/3. Cameron then plays and fetches with the Misty Rainforest to find an island to the battlefield. He'll then tap for 4 and very happily cast a Clever Impersonator to copy Coma. And so Cameron will pass the turn to Shelby. Chandler and Cameron will make a 3/3 on upkeep, and Ethan will get another Smothering Tithe token. Shelby plays his Vivid Crag as his land for turn. He then taps for 4 and casts his Treasonous Ogre. He'll then move to combat and swing Marchesa at Ethan, getting a Dethrone counter on her, and Ethan will gladly take it. He then passes turn to Chandler, 3/3s are made, and Chandler does not pay. He would then play Blighted Woodland as land for turn, then move to combat, swinging 6 Commander in the air at Cameron. He then decides to tap for 4 and spin the wheel again with Pouncing Shore Shark. He will also bounce Cameron's Coma back to his hand. And after spinning the wheel yet again, he hits an Avenger of Zendikar, making 5 0/1 plant tokens. He then passes the turn to Ethan, and sadly Cameron doesn't get to make 3/3s anymore. Ethan will then tap for 3 with 1 light floating and cast Argothian Enchantress. He'll then cast Utopia Sprawl on his Canopy Vista, drawing 2 cards and gaining a life. And when Utopia Sprawl hits the field, he names white. And he finally finds a way to deal with that pesky Coma. He casts Kenrith's Transformation targeting it, drawing 2 cards and gaining a life. After it resolves, he will draw a 3rd card. He will then play a Bountiful Promenade as land for turn, and then sacrifice Croson Verge to search for 2 lands, Arctic Treeline, and a Scattered Grove. He'll then pass the turn to Cameron and discard 2 cards during his cleanup. And on Cameron's draw step, Ethan will make a treasure token. And then after a lot of thinking, Cameron recasts Clever Impersonator and decides to copy Ethan's Smothering Tithe and not Coma. Cameron will then play Is It Boilerworks as land for turn, and in response to the trigger, end his turn. And at the beginning of Shelby's turn, Ethan and Cameron will make a treasure token. And now in his main phase, Shelby will tap for 3 mana and cast Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Shelby will then pay 9 life to make 3 red mana, and then tap for 3 mana, and cast Scourge of the Throne. Shelby then moves to combat, and swings Treasonous Ogre and Marchesa at Ethan, and gets 2 dethrone triggers. And not really wanting to block with his 2 card draw engines, Ethan decides to take the 9 damage. He then just passes the turn to Chandler, and Ethan and Cameron will make a treasure on his draw step. Chandler will then tap for 3 and cast a Wood Elves to shock in a Stomping Ground to the battlefield. An Avenger of Zendikar's landfall will trigger, putting a 1/1 counter on all of Chandler's plants. He'll then tap for 3 and cast Dak Faden, and Chandler will uptick him to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. And unfortunately, both Cameron and Ethan forget about Smothering Tithe here. He will then decide to move to combat. First things first, swinging 6 more Commander at Cameron in the air. He then decides to swing Avenger of Zendikar at Shelby, and finally, all 5 of his 3/3s at Ethan. Nobody decides to block, and so everybody takes their damage. And Chandler comments about how he's gonna get mollywopped by Shelby next turn before passing to Ethan. And Cameron will make a treasure when Ethan draws. Ethan starts his turn off with a Wild Growth to draw 2 and gain 1 life. He then casts an Ancestral Mask on Sythis, drawing 2 more and gaining another life. He then casts the Unflinching Courage that he's had in hand this whole time, drawing 2 more and gaining yet another life. And so Sythis is now a casual 21 power, lifelink trampler. But everybody has good enough blocks to survive the attack from Sythis, and it would put him back on the throne, while Shelby has a Scourge of the Throne. And Cameron suddenly remembered Ethan drew 6 cards, and asked if he would like to pay 12 mana. Ethan of course cannot, so Cameron makes 6 treasures. Ethan then plays the Plains and casts Aura of Silence, drawing 2, gaining 1, and Cameron will make 2 more treasures. And so Sythis now has 23 power, but Ethan still ultimately decides to pass the turn, and he has to discard 4 cards on his cleanup phase. Now on Cameron's turn, he starts off with a Blightstep Pathway as his land for turn, and then spends a little bit of time thinking and decides to just pass. And now on Shelby's turn, he plays a Swamp as land for turn. And after that, he pays 6 life to Treasonous Ogre, and then taps for 4 more to cast a Mob Rule. He chooses to gain control of all creatures power 3 or less, and untap them. They gain haste. Ethan and Chandler then realize that with 2 combat phases from Scourge of the Throne, Shelby's pretty much going to win this turn. And so after a quick discussion, Chandler and Ethan agree that if Ethan uses his Aura of Silence to destroy his Kenris transformation, Chandler will sacrifice all of his 3/3s to prevent Shelby from killing them this turn. But in response, Shelby casts Croesus' Charm, bouncing Coma to Chandler's hand so he can't sacrifice his 3/3s. But the stack isn't stopping yet. Ethan casts Generous Gift to try to destroy Kenris transformation one more time. And funnily enough, Ethan's the one that gets the 3/3 because it was his enchantment, even though it was on Chandler's creature. And so with Croesus' Charm still on the stack, Chandler sacrifices all 5 of his 3/3s to tap down Shelby's 4 creatures, and the 5th one taps Sythis. Coma is then bounced back to Chandler's hand, and Ethan's Aura of Silence ability fizzles. And finally, Mob Rule resolves, and Shelby gains control of all creatures power 3 or less. And then moves to combat, and full swings at Chandler. And there are a whole bunch of dethrone triggers. In total, Chandler will take 21 damage this turn. And that's a big chunk, but it's a whole lot less than what it would have been. Now on Chandler's turn, he does not pay for Smothering Tithe, and he plays a Mountain as land for turn, and Avenger's Landfall triggers. He then taps for 6 and casts a Rishkar's Expertise to draw 6 cards. And for some reason, whenever Chandler draws cards, it seems like Cameron and Ethan forget about Smothering Tithe. And from the Rishkar's Expertise free cast, Chandler casts Return of the Wildspeaker to give all of his non-human creatures +3/+3. Chandler then downticks Dak Faden to try to gain control of Cameron's Rakdos Signet, but Cameron taps it in response. Chandler then attempts to go for the win by swinging 9 Commander at Cameron in the air, which would be enough to kill him with Commander damage. He then swings with Avenger, Wood Elves, and 2 of his 6/7 plants at Ethan for 23 damage, and then the last 3 of his plants for 18 at Shelby. Ethan and Shelby think this is the end, but Cameron sacrifices 3 treasures and casts the glorious end he's had since his starting hand. And unfortunately, Chandler can't do anything about it, so the turn ends, and it's now Ethan's turn. Ethan's getting ready to gain some life back with Sythis, but Cameron stops him on his upkeep, sacrifices 6 treasures, and casts Discontinuity. Ethan can't do anything about this either, so the turn is now Cameron's. and Cameron does not pay for his smothering tithe tax. He then drops a Diluvium Primordial, and targets Generous Gift, Return of the Wild Speaker, and Mob Rule with its ability. He casts Mob Rule to gain control of all creatures power 4 or greater. Then casts Return of the Wild Speaker to give them all +3/+3 as long as they're not a human. Cameron then decides he doesn't actually want to cast Generous Gift. And so Cameron swings out, specifying only that Scourge of the Throne goes at Ethan to get the extra combat phase, and with everybody else's creatures and Giga Sythis, that's more than enough for Cameron to win. Well, there you have it, guys. That was an amazing win from Cameron. The balance of that game swung so much there in that last turn cycle. It was pretty crazy, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did too. As always, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Be sure to check us out on our social media pages. Links will be down in the description with the deck lists. We're planning to record some new games with some new commanders in the near future, along with some more CDH games. But as always, you guys, thank you so much for watching again, and have a smooth day.